and welcome to Hedgehog Hollow and welcome back to my series with H&D MD. This month we're going to be using the H&D MD CrafTangles stencil called Lace. It's a really nice mandala stencil and it's a little bit different to some others that are on the market, and we'll talk about that during the tutorial. We're actually going to make 2 cards today and 2 cards in the next video as well. The first card we're going to make is this gorgeous one here with Distress Oxides to create colour on black cardstock, and then we're going to add this spot detail and create a 3D silver embellishment. Then in the second card, we're again going to use the resist technique. We're going to create this gorgeous leather effect background with embossing powder and another 3D sentiment. I've got lots of tips and tricks to show you, so let's get started. So this is the first card we're going to make. I've done a little bit of preparation here. We're going to be using Distress Oxides and one of my Barber's brushes. Now you can use any pigment ink. I would recommend the Distress Oxides because they blend really nicely with a brush, and because they've got that dye element, it gives you a bit more play in them. Your normal Distress inks will not work for this technique because they're going to soak into the black cardstock and you're not going to see them. It's the pigment hybrid in these inks that allows us to see them on the top. And I think I'm going to stick with the picked raspberry for this card, but you could use the worn lipstick too and just build up a third layer. Now the first layer of ink that you put down is just going to look a little bit chalky. That's because that layer of ink gets absorbed into the cardstock. And I'm using my fingers to hold down the cardstock as well as the stencil here. Now I do have a couple of bits of masking tape. This is just black lawn fawn cardstock. It is cut down to 4 inches by 5 1/4. So you can see that because I've got the masking tape on this side, this Barber's brush is getting a little bit old. It is 10 years old, so I should caution you that it's taken this long for the hairs to start falling out, but I'm going to shortly replace this one now. I'm going to do the left-hand side last because that's where I've got my masking tape down. So the first layer just looks a little bit chalky. The second layer is when the pigment's really going to stand on top of that paper and give you that stunning effect on the dark cardstock. And I can already see that it's getting much, much stronger. And I'm not going to lift it up just yet because otherwise we'll get a blurry image. And now I'm going to move this piece of tape. I'm going to put it over here so it holds down on this side, like so, and I'm still going to keep my fingers there. So again, that first one that we put down, it's just a little bit chalky and a little bit pinky because that dye gets absorbed into the cardstock. When we go back now with a second layer, you'll see that that pink is really popping. Now that's because of the way that this fusion works. And once you are happy with that effect, you can lift up your stencil and you can see there that stunning mandala underneath. Now the stencil and the Teflon mat are super easy to clean. A baby wipe or run them under the tap and they'll be absolutely fine. I'm going to put the lid back on my ink. We're also going to add some extra details to this. The first thing I'm going to do though is I am going to heat set this. Because of that pigment, it's likely to move around a little bit more. It's going to be wetter for longer. So I'm just going to use my Ranger Heat It tool. You could use your embossing tool. And I'm just going to give it a little bit of a heat set.
So here I have started using a Kirarina Wink, which is a white enamel paint type pen, which is made by the makers of Copic, and it shows up really nicely on black cardstock. Now we did use a little bit of footage at the beginning for some reason, so hence I am talking you through what I'm doing here. So I start at the top of a piece and then I make a dot at the bottom and then I count how many are in between to try and make it as even as possible. So let's have a look at how the whole piece goes and then we can show you how we're going to mount it up.
these. Let me lift this up so you can see. I love how this dots effect comes out. And I think it really highlights some of the colours and things on there. And I love how that pink looks as well on the black cardstock. So now we're going to do our sentiment. I will mention just beforehand, so you'll see that I work very systematically. I'm a lefty, so I tend to put my hand over everything. So I do rotate my cardstock around quite a lot as well. But when I do things, I try to make it as even as possible. So I do one line, I do it all the way around. If for here, I do my 4, my 3, my 2, my 1, so that they were fairly even. So if you're working that way, you should get a fairly even effect. Or you may prefer the more random effect. But I have to say, I do have a bit of OCD when it comes to that, because I like to do it quite evenly. So here I have a happy sentiment that I cut out just on some pink cardstock I happen to have around. And this is just a lawn fawn die from my stash. Of course, I will link all these things up for you. Now, I'm going to show you a technique to make these lovely 3D sentiments. Now, if you change your mind halfway through, it's also a really great technique because we can change colour. But for now, I'm going to go with a silver sentiment. So I have some Ranger Silver Embossing Powder over here. I also have my favourite tweezers here. And I'm going to lift this up. So I've got my heat embossing tool here. I'm going to use my tweezers to hold this still. And the reason I like these tweezers is they're like a long nose, so they can hold the edges of the cardstock, so it's not going to affect the embossing, and I can emboss in between them. So my embossing powder is bubbling away nicely. And you just want to give that a couple of seconds to set and cool down. Now the great thing is, so I like the silver on here, and I think it's going to pop really nicely across there. But say for instance you'd used white, and I have some white embossing powder just to the side here for another project. You could now add VersaMark and add your second layer as white. You can also play around between different shades of metallic, so you could now add some rose gold, and what you'll find is the two embossing powders will mix and give you a marbled effect. And I'll definitely be showing you how to do that on future projects. I love how these come out. So I'm going to lift this up. This is a technique we used to use years and years ago, and you'll have seen me on the Hedgehog Hollow channel do the same thing with ultra thick embossing powders. There's loads of different mediums we can do this technique with. Now I'm going to hold this in a different place this time, just to switch it up a little bit. So I work quite systematically, so I do my H and my A, and then I move my tweezers, and then I do my PPY, and that gives you a nice even image. Now also you'll notice when I got some bubbles, I went back and I reheated that area because it just evens it out. Now I'm going to do a third coat. You can do probably up to about 5 coats before you start having overhang issues. And you can do just a few coats if you want a light effect, but I do tend to like these stronger effects, and I just leave my embossing powder in here and I just dip it in. It's a little bit of a time saver on there. So let's do this as our final coat. So this is 3 coats, and I'm going to put my embossing powder back now. And I love these little tidy trays. You'll see I use those all of the time on projects. So again, I'm going to work at one end, and then I'll move my tweezers and work at the other end. And that's now given me a really nice even coat. I'm going to lift this up so you can see that it's just got that nice domed image, and there's no embossing powder hanging off the edges. I also this time eliminated lots of the bubbles, so when you get to that point you pretty much know that you're on the right track and have the right amount of powder on there. Just going to stick this to the side. And I also have a card base here. So this is half a piece of Neenah Solar White that I've cut in half lengthways. I'm going to fold this down. Now I have just bought myself a Teflon embossing folder. Everyone raves about them, so I'm trialing it out, and then I will do a comparison video between the one I normally use and this Teflon one, because these Teflon ones do cost a bit more money. So I will try it out first of all, and then I'll let you know my thoughts on it. So here I have my big roll of foam. I'm going to cut myself off a nice big length. And we have a stray brad on the back there. This is one stencil that I did earlier that didn't go to plan. You can see I ended up with a blurry effect. So if that happens to you, just turn the cardstock over and have another go, exactly as I did here. And I'm going to fill in. I have a little bit of tape left over here, and I might as well put that in the middle. So I'm going to peel this off. And then I always open up my card bases when I am setting things on, this way up. I just find if you have it closed, you still have a little bit of play and your card base tends to move around. But you open it up, it's on a solid surface, it's not going to move anywhere. Now I'm going to put this happy in. I tend to use, when I'm making cards, unless I'm making it for a particular person or occasion that I know, I tend to using like happy, hi, hello, friends, which we're going to use in the second card, things like that, because it's really easy. So I could either put a happy birthday on the inside, or I can just add a piece of cardstock here with the birthday on, or I can send happy thoughts. There's so many different options with these generic sentiments, and I just find that I tend to use the cards more because they have more flexibility in them as well. So I'm now going to stick this down, and I'm going to stick it down using some glossy accents, which I keep in my drawer upside down. So I have a little nail polish holder that keeps all these things upside down like this, and I'm going to stick this onto the back, and I'm going to use very small dots. And I tend to put a few around particularly curly pieces, one at the tops of Ys, bottoms of Ys, ends of tails, those sorts of things. So you can see, don't need a particularly even space, but they're very small dots. I'm not really squeezing, I'm just using what's on the nib. And the glossy accents will adhere anything to anything. It's almost like a super glue. And of course it also gives you that nice lacquer effect if you use it that way too. I'm just going all over my H. And I'm actually going to pick it up with my tweezers so I don't get glue everywhere. And then I'm going to stick down my happy. So here I'm just going to press all of those areas down. Now for things like this, and I want to leave them to dry, I actually use my big shot plates. So mine are right here for me. And what I do is I place the card upside down, place my piece on top, and then I just leave it like that, maybe for about 20 minutes. And then I find that everything has, oh, it's got out of focus because I keep moving, and then you can see that it just stays firm like that. So I'm just going to leave that there, and then my happy will be nice and dry after about 20 minutes, and we'll take some photographs, and they'll be after this second card. So let's move on to making our second card, and then I can show you how this came out in the end. So our second card, we're going to use a similar technique as we used on the words previously. I'm going to stick again down the lace stencil, and this is going to be our focus for the month. I'm going to show you 4 different ways in 2 videos how to use this lace stencil. So again, I'm going to do it fairly symmetrically, and I'm going to just stick the stencil down, and I'm going to hold the cardstock with my fingers because I don't want any areas that won't have the embossing powder. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over, I'm going to work over the entire piece of cardstock with my VersaMark pad, and I'm going to turn around here. I'm going to try to make sure I cover every area twice, just to make sure that the glue has got through. And then we're going to lift this panel up, and you will be able to see where your VersaMark has and hasn't been. And then I'm going to use this rose gold embossing powder, which is new from Lawn Fawn. It's a stunning, stunning colour. And then you're going to get a resist image of your stencil. So I'm just going to start working over. Some areas that are super fine, you're going to get less VersaMark in, but it's actually going to give you a really pretty effect. So you can see here how I'm working over the image. And if you have a little corner like that that doesn't seem to have picked up the powder, I'm just going to poke my cardstock back into my VersaMark. And you can see there I now have that solid piece. So I'm now going to melt this. I've got my Wagner heat tool here. I'm going to move my embossing powder out the way because otherwise I'll end up heating my whole tray. So you can see there, now this is going to be super, super hot, so I'd recommend you leave this for a couple of minutes to cool, but you can see that gorgeous shimmer that we've got on our piece. So now we are ready to complete our card. Now I'm going to do exactly the same sentiment with the friends, so it's a great way to get some practice in, and I'm also going to show you how to do the little dot of the eye as well. So again, to do that, we're going to use our VersaMark pad, and we're going to ink up our friend sentiment. I'm also going to ink up this little dot. And you'll find it'll stick to everything, but that's okay. So again, I'm going to use some embossing powder. I'm going to use Lawn Fawn White. These new Lawn Fawn powders I really like working with. I've used them a few times now, and I think that they give a really nice detail to the embossing. So again, we're going to need to do a few coats. And again, I'm going to pick up the little dot, and I'm going to do that first, seeing as it's stuck here. So I'm going to first of all clamp it while I heat up my tool. And you really want to work with a hot tool on small pieces. You'll find it makes life much, much easier. And then we're going to start knocking it off. And then we'll move on to our friends. And again, we're going to want to do a few coats on all of these. So I'm going to ink up my friends again. And the one thing to remember when you're working with embossing powder is it does take a few seconds for it to dry. So don't think that as soon as you've turned your heat tool off, it's ready to go. It will be like hot jam. You'll either find you smudge it or you can burn yourself quite badly on it. So just have a little bit of caution when you're doing that as well. So I'm going to do this just while it's stuck in just the right place on my tweezers. So this, right this second, if I touch this, I'd smudge it, it would hurt my finger. And then after just maybe 5 to 10 seconds, you can start working with it again. So again, I'm going to dip it in, just because it happens to be in the right place. And now you can see I have, and I'm going to put this under my hand here, you can see I've got a nice even enamel dot on there. So now that that is done, I'm going to lift it off my tweezers, and what you will get, if I pop it in the palm of my hand, is you'll get a little edge where those tweezers have been, and we're going to get rid of that once we've done our next stage on our friends. So let's ink up our friends. And when our heat tool is on, I'm just going to briefly, once it's really, really hot, put it over that dot, and you'll find that those edges will soften again and there'll be a nice perfect edge on there. So again, so we've got 2 coats on our friends. I'm going to do that third one because that really does seem to be the charm when you're working with these particular sentiments. We also finished off our little dot, which is stuck to my work surface, so I'm going to just peel off this little bit of embossing powder that's stuck on there, and I'm going to, there we are, move it back in. So again, I'm going to add powder to this. I'm going to dip it in here quite liberally. And what you'll notice is rather than holding these friends, I tend to put my, because they're a long nose tweezer, I use this for all sorts of things. I love these tweezers. They fit perfectly in these little holes. And you'll find when you put it in those little holes, you're not actually touching the tweezers themselves, the sentiment itself rather, so you don't get any issues that you have to go back and fix. So again, I will link those tweezers up for you. And I've got a little bit, I cleaned this out earlier after using a coloured embossing powder. Just use either your powder tool, mine is in packed, ready for a trip I'm going on, whereas I'm just going to use the embossing buddy to put it back in there, and that will remove any static in there as well. Now if you have embossing powder on here, I'm also going to show you how to get that off. I am going to use, out of my tool drawer, I have a Silhouette, or this is the Stampin' Up one. This was a vinyl tool, and you can buy these at Bed Bath & Beyond, and I'll link them up on Amazon too. You can just scrape it across and you can see there all of that is just coming straight off again. So that works perfectly too. You can just do that and pop that straight in the bin. So that's how I get off any embossing powder, and that works if you get it on your work surface, anywhere. Just take that tool and it'll pick it straight off for you. So now we are ready to assemble our card. So again, I have half a piece of Neenah Solar White. So out of 1 piece of cardstock, white cardstock, you could get both of these cards. Let's use this again. I'm also going to use my foam tape to pop it up because I just think that little bit of extra dimension is perfect. And I always cut these big long strips off, and lots of you ask me what I do with the edges. So I'll show you what I do if I have anything left once I've gone all the way around and trimmed. And I find this is the way to get the least waste, because I'm not cutting tiny bits off at the end. I'm just cutting somewhere near the edge, next piece, and so on. And then this piece that's left, I actually just stick on the edge of my foam, just like this. And then I use this in the next card. And because I'm making several cards a day, I don't have much issue. If you wanted to work out what you need all the way around, you could do that too. But any pieces you have left, whether they're big or small, I stick them on the edge, and I find that I always use them up. And they still stay sticky on there as well. So I'm going to stick this piece down again. Like so. And I love how this looks and feels. It almost feels like a leather piece. I think it's really very tactile and pretty. And now we're going to use our friends on the top here. And again, I'm going to use my glossy accents, which I popped back in my little nail polish holder. And I have all my liquid glues upside down in there. So I'm going to, again, just use the tiniest bit of pressure, very small dots. And then I will put it to dry in a Big Shot sandwich. Now the reason I don't put it through the Big Shot, which you could do, and sometimes I do if it's a flat panel, is because of the foam element. It would just completely squish that foam we've put underneath, and it would have been pointless. Now if you want to stick this on and run it through your Big Shot and leave it there for 5 to 10 minutes before you put the foam on, just on this base layer here, that would work too. And if I have a really stubborn item that I know is a little bit difficult with adhesion, I do that. So here's my little piece there. And again, I'm going to use my tweezers here to stick this down. Now the other tool that I use quite regularly, and you've seen me use, is I use a wallpaper roller. And I find that's really great for these small sentiments too. And I just roll that over the top. You'll have seen that in lots of my videos. So there we go. And the end of these tweezers are really great because they're long nosed, so I can pop those down too. So I'm going to put that extra pressure in on my big shot. So I have a piece here, I have some extra pieces on here, and then my glittery one, and I'm going to then put that upside down. So I'm going to leave that to dry. Now you can see some pictures on your screen of how those cards look once those panels have dried, and how gorgeous those sentiments look. Look at those dots and the dimension to them, and there's some great pictures there. Now all of these pictures will be on the HNDMD blog as well as the Hedgehog Hollow blog, so check out both of those links below this video. If you're on a mobile device, you'll need to click the arrow in the bottom right hand corner, and on a desktop click the show me more below the video title. Thank you so much for tuning in today. There are also buttons coming up on your screen for subscribing both to the HNDMD channel as well as the Hedgehog Hollow channel. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed this. Do join me later in the month for some more inspiration with this lace stencil, and I will see you again very soon. Happy stamping. Bye!